Hey there, welcome to the channel. This gluten-free pizza crust recipe is not only gluten-free, it's also egg-free, dairy-free, vegan. What else can I say? Oh yeah, it's easy to make too. I'm Jamie with SavorySaver. I share gluten-free recipes, tips, tricks, and resources to make your gluten-free lifestyle easier. So please consider hitting subscribe and let me show you how I make this so I can give it a taste. All right guys, so here on this channel, you know I love me some Caputo gluten-free flour. It's what I use in my pizza 95% of the time, but it has wheat starch and some of you guys can't use it. So today we're gonna do it from scratch completely. We are gonna use the Loopy Whisk recipe because I really like her recipes. I am gonna cut it in half, so we got a little bit of test there to see how it comes out. So that'll be a good test for you. This actually makes two 11-inch pizzas. I'm gonna only do the one. I am doing it by weight, especially since I'm cutting it in half. That'll be more accurate. So I do suggest if you've not started baking gluten-free yet and doing that by weight, definitely look into doing that. It is a change in your mindset if you're used to baking in cups and teaspoons and all of that. But it's not difficult. It's just a learning curve like everything else gluten-free. With this being a Loopy Whisk recipe, she also is really good about substitutions in her recipe, and she's good about listing what this has and what it does not have. So the recipe that I'm making today is also vegan. So it's egg-free and it's dairy-free. So since toppings are all what you want to do, you can make this a totally vegan pizza if you want. You can make it a totally dairy-free pizza if you want. All of that being said, the full list of ingredients will be below in the description, along with any links to ingredients you may not be able to find in your local stores. Also, I will list her substitutions that can be used in place of the flours that she does use. She's always really good about that as well. So enough of me yapping about the recipe. Let's get started. All right guys, so I am using the stand mixer with this just to make it quicker for me. And you can do this by hand. I would not worry about it if you are doing it by hand. I think it'll come out just fine. So to the bowl, I am giving you the halved amounts. So I'm gonna give you the half amounts here as well as the half amounts down below in the description. For the full 2 crust recipe, be sure to click on her link to get that if you're going for it. So to the bowl, I have 60 grams of millet flour, and you're also gonna need millet flour for dusting the surface to shape out the dough. I've also got 57 grams of tapioca starch. Instead of tapioca starch, you could also use cornstarch, potato starch, or arrowroot. I've got 40 grams of sorghum flour, and in place of that, you could actually use buckwheat flour, white Teff, or oat flour if you needed to. Next, I'm gonna add 8 grams of granulated sugar. I'm also gonna add 3 grams of instant yeast and 3 grams of table salt. Let's give it a quick whisk. You want everything blended together. And then hopefully there's plenty in there for the mixer to do its job. If not, I may be mixing a little bit by hand. Put a well in the middle of it so we're ready to go. And let's put this to the side for just a minute. Now, Loopy Whisk is famous for making a psyllium husk gel, which I really like using it. It does give gluten-free breads a much better chew, and it stabilizes it, and just better texture all around. So I do like recipes that use psyllium husk. So I'm using 6.5 grams of psyllium husk powder. So I'm adding it to 210 grams of warm water, and this is actually about 125 degrees or so because I want to make sure it activates the yeast. So I'm going to whisk that together. It's going to take about 30 to 45 seconds to form a gel. So while it does that, I'm going to get my mixer ready. All right, so this is gelled up, and it hasn't gelled up quite as much as her other recipes do. And that may be because I cut the recipe in half, but I'm not super concerned with that. It still is pretty thick, so I wouldn't worry about that just yet. Now I'm gonna add some apple cider vinegar as well as some olive oil. It's 4 grams of each. I just had it in one bowl just to save myself a dish. And that's the great thing about measuring by weight, is that if I'm doing it by weight, I can throw multiple things in a bowl and just make sure it weighs right, as opposed to 2 and 3 different cups or teaspoons or whatever. All right, so let's mix everything together to combine it. Now let's add it to our dough. So I'm gonna add it in to the well I've made in the center. I'm gonna mix it. It says to knead the dough until it's smooth and all the ingredients are evenly incorporated. Use a rubber spatula to occasionally scrape along the sides and the bottom to prevent dry patches. Guys, this is not going to take long with this. Maybe 3 minutes, I'm just guessing. So let's get it in there. See how thick it is? That's going to help stabilize everything. I'm not going to do this super fast. I'm going to start it off slow and then maybe bump it up to somewhere between 4 and 6. Okay, so I've got most of the dough together. I just kept pushing down the flour until it incorporated in there. Now I'm going to take that rubber spatula, make a few passes around the bowl to get any of the dry stuff on the sides down in there. And then I think I'm going to blend it for another minute or so just to make sure it's nice and smooth. Okay, so after another minute, this is what it looks like. She says that it should be soft, slack, and sticky, which I think that's exactly what this is. She also says you shouldn't have any lumps of dry ingredients or psyllium husk gel, which I don't see any of that either. So now, instead of letting it rise like normal pizza crust, she actually has us shape it at this point. So let's get that started. So she says to turn the pizza dough out onto a floured surface. I'm actually going to do it on parchment paper and my pizza screen because it's going to make it easy for me to move around. I can slide the parchment paper right onto the baking stone that I'm going to use to bake it on. So this is lightweight, so it's easy to move around. It's going to be easy for me to slide on and off. This is what I like to do the most. It's an easy method. These are not expensive, and we cook pizzas on them, and then the heat gets through, and I don't have to take out a frozen pizza, whether it be gluten-free or gluten-full, from the oven that's been sitting directly on the rack. I'm going to use some more millet flour to put on the surface of the parchment paper. Let's get our dough out onto the surface. Look at that, all one piece. Nice clean bowl, love that. Okay, now it says to take your fingers and we're gonna press a well into the middle. And now I want to keep working it around, pushing the dough out, pushing it out a little bit each time. And we'll see how much of a circle I can get. And this is going to be fairly thin, and then around the edge of the 11-inch circle, we want that raised about 1/2 inch. So this is going to be a thin pizza. You know, I think I'm going to take it off of this, shape it on this, and then transfer it back over. That's a little better. It's not sticking, or it's not sliding rather. All right, guys, this is what I've got. It's mostly round. It's not exact, but we're pretty good. And we are at about 11 inches, which is what Kat says in her recipe. So when shaping it, I did find that I needed a little more flour on my fingers. So I think if you just lightly dust a little bit on the top, especially on the edges where you're pushing out, it may make it a little bit easier. You just don't want too much of it because you don't want to put it into the dough because that'll dry out. Now I'm going to slide it back under the screen. See how easy that was? Highly recommend one of these if you don't have one. Now it says to lightly cover the pizza crust with a tea towel or plastic wrap because we don't want it to dry out. I'm actually going to use plastic wrap, I think, just because I feel like the towel would make it dry out a little bit more. So I'm going to use plastic wrap. Now we need to let it proof, so someplace warm, about 45 minutes to an hour. I am going to proof it in the oven like I do my other bread doughs. I just turned the oven on for just a few seconds, turned it back off just to make it a little warmer. It's about 66 here in the house, which is a little chilly for this to rise, in my opinion. So I'm going to get it proofed, and I'll probably proof it in there for about a half hour, and then I'll take it out and preheat my oven. So let's get this proofing. So this has actually been about 40 minutes in the oven, with the oven off, of course, and it's visibly puffy now. The 30 minutes just didn't look long enough for me. So I've taken it out of the oven because now I need to preheat the oven. So to do that, I've got my pizza stone out. I'm gonna put it in the oven and preheat the oven to 475 degrees Fahrenheit. That's probably gonna take 15 to 20 minutes, and I'm gonna let it go probably the full 20. That'll bring our pizza crust up to an hour proof because I want this and the oven to be super hot so we get good pizza out of the deal. So let me preheat the oven. I'll get my ingredients together for toppings and then we'll get it topped and baked off. So the oven should be preheated in just a couple minutes. So let's go over toppings real quick. This is dealer's choice, guys. If you're vegan, keep them vegan. If you're dairy-free, put your favorite dairy-free cheese or whatever you're using on that. There's the oven. I'm gonna use what we typically use on any pizza I make here. I'm gonna use the sauce we grab. Actually, I think this is Lidl. I just grab whatever we like the taste of. I always use, or almost always, not very often I don't, we use the canned Parmesan. So I put my sauce down and then my canned Parmesan on it. We also tend to put garlic powder directly over it. And then for seasoning, I typically will use an Italian seasoned blend or just some oregano or even parsley and oregano, whatever I grab. The team over at FlavorSeed sent me their Godfather blend. This is their answer to Italian seasoning. So while they didn't sponsor the video, they did send this over for me to try. We've tried their stuff in the past, which is how I got connected with them, but they have a very good lineup of seasonings, anything you can think of. They are gluten-free, they are non-GMO, they are definitely worth checking out. So their information is down below if you want to look at trying a new seasoning. We are not dairy-free here, so we're actually going to use cheese, and evidently I have 2 bags open. So we're going to do some mozzarella as well as this gourmet pizza blend. And if I need more cheese, I'll grab a 3rd bag, because why not? Okay, there's one final step on the pizza crust, and then we're gonna top it. All right, guys, so here's our crust. And again, it rose in the middle more than I thought. Let's see if I can press that out. Oh yeah, that looks a little better. I don't wanna lose all the bubbles that are created, but I do want it flat, a little bit anyway. All right, let's peel this off. No sticking, which is nice. And I do like that I use plastic wrap instead of a towel. Now the last thing I need to do with the crust is Kat says to put a little bit of olive oil around the edge of the crust to help browning. And she says pretty much to do this regardless. This is not a option. She says to just do it. So I think the easiest way to do that is for me to dribble a little bit all around the side and then brush it after. Okay, let's get this topped. All right, so there's our sauce, Parmesan. I do this because my mom always did it to pizza. Garlic powder. If it were just me, I would add red pepper flakes, but Tara doesn't do red pepper flakes. Add a sprinkling of this Italian seasoning from FlavorSeed. Guys, this is a big bag. This is a 5-ounce bag. They have smaller containers too, but I love that they put it in the bag that I can either pour in my spice jar or leave in here. Okay, so the cheese has been put on. I used the rest of the mozzarella as well as some of the gourmet. And this wouldn't be a SavorySaver video if I didn't make mistakes while I was filming and cooking. So we're also gonna put pepperoni on this pizza. And don't cringe, but I'm using canned mushrooms on it as well. We love canned mushrooms on our pizza. If you do not, of course, don't use them. Don't use pepperoni. Use vegan. Whatever you want to do, make it your own. And finally, I do like to put a little bit of cheese over the toppings because it makes me think that it's holding them down. Let's get this baked off. It's a 15 to 18 minute bake. You want the crust to be deeply golden brown. And of course, the cheese and the toppings to be bubbly and browned as well. I'm gonna transfer it to the oven and I will slide it onto the baking stone. I'm gonna leave the parchment. Well, you know what? Let's see if I can slide the parchment off as well. It shouldn't need that to bake. Sometimes I leave the parchment on underneath. So I'm gonna slide that on. And if you don't have a baking stone, then you can use a heavy duty baking sheet. And then of course you would want to put that upside down because it'll be easier to maneuver. Let's get this baked and then I'll snap a picture or two and we will give it a taste. Did you guys see that? It just stuck to the parchment paper. So guess what? It's baking on the parchment paper. We'll be right back. Can you guys see that bubbling? The crust looks amazing. It smells amazing in here. It only needs a couple more minutes and I'm gonna take it out of the oven. So let me do that and we'll take a look at it. Look at that. The cheese is nice and browned. The crust is deeply golden. Let's get this cut and give it a taste. All right, guys, so it baked for the 15 minutes. I really actually think it could have gone a little longer, but the cheese was pretty dark. So it is not out straight, so hopefully it has some good chew to it. It's not like the thin crust cracker gluten-free crust that you get sometimes, which I have to say I don't usually like. Tara doesn't usually like them. The bottom of it, that's as brown as that got for me, which is fine. It's baked through from the looks of it, and I'm okay with that. I do like Caputo's browning a little bit better, but to each his own, and this one doesn't have wheat starch in it, so if it's good, you guys that can't have wheat, this might be a winner. Let's try it. All right, most of that piece is gone. Let's talk about it. Texture-wise, I actually really like it. It tastes like pizza crust. So it's always a big thing here on the channel that if it doesn't taste gluten-free, I'm all for it. So I do really like that. I really like how easy it went together. Loopy Whisk recipes usually are pretty easy. She gives really good detailed instructions, but all of them are easy to follow, so don't be overwhelmed if you look at any of her recipes because it's just good information. So let's get you a little closer to that. So it tears nicely. I will say I feel that a couple pieces were a little wet. Not soaking wet, but they were a little wet, but I'm wondering if I just had too much sauce on it. I tend to over sauce my pizzas. So let's try the crust. I really like the crust. It tastes like pizza crust. And it's a little crispy on the outside from where we brushed that olive oil on, but the inside's nice and chewy, really good texture, good air bubbles in it. Okay, it's almost gone. I'm gonna finish that piece and then we'll finish the conversation. Okay, had my water, finished that slice of pizza off. What is there left to say? It's an easy recipe. I don't think there's anything difficult to find ingredient-wise, but I will link down below to all the ingredients that you might not be able to find nearby, as well as that Italian seasoning from Flavor Seed. Again, I do really like their flavor blends. Very good. They are something you will have to order online, but if you're looking to try something new, it's all down there in the description. I'll also link to a couple things that I like. The pizza screen is something we use all the time. It's good for not only pizzas, but it's also good if you want to warm up a sandwich and have some kind of melt, then you can put it on the screen and it lets the air circulate through and it's not right on the grid of the oven. They're aluminum, so they're super lightweight, easy to move around, and they cool really quickly. The pizza stone, I like using a pizza stone, but use a heavy duty cookie sheet if that's all you have. You just want something that's gonna have contact with that pizza crust because you're gonna get a better bake on it. There's no wheat starch in this for those of you that can't have wheat. I will say, I go back to Caputo every time because I really do like their flour blend for pizza crust. I get really good rise with it and I usually get really good crust with it, although sometimes it just doesn't come out right, which is usually a me thing because that's how gluten-free baking is. But easy gluten-free pizza crust, the Loopy Whisk. It's egg-free, dairy-free, vegan, very good crust, especially if you want to make it totally from scratch. No problems with this whatsoever. This is my first video of 2025 going on the channel. So hopefully if you're watching this in June, there's been many more videos since then. Guys, leave me your comments below. I love hearing from you. I love conversing with you guys in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.